Okay. Call this meeting to order, the informational meeting for the Sioux Falls City Council, Tuesday, August 21st. Welcome to everyone who's here at Carnegie Town Hall, those of you watching us on CityLink and on siouxfalls.org. I welcome you. A couple of things very quickly before we do staff reports. Councilor Entman is not with us this afternoon and evening. He is out on business. And Councilor Aguilar will not be with us either this afternoon or this evening. She is also out with a family health emergency, and we'll just just think of both of them, put them in our thoughts, and keep that in mind as we move ahead. Then we'll do staff reports, starting with Lori Hogstead, City Clerk.
All right, thank you, Council Chair Urbanbach and council members. Of course, it wouldn't be a report if I didn't give a building project update. Right now, they are working on the tuck pointing, as you can see as you came in. It's dirty and dusty and a little noisy, but that's okay because it's really looking nice what they have done. They're going to finish the drilling and removal this week, so the noise will be done. You know, after a while, you don't even notice it, actually. And then they'll be here another 3 to 4 weeks putting in on the new tuck pointing. It is going to take longer than I had thought. So that will probably be the end of September, beginning of October. Tomorrow the roofing will proceed, and we should have an interesting day tomorrow. They're going to actually seal off part of the building because they're going to be working on the roof above us, and it's supposed to be a lot worse as far as smell than what we've experienced in the past. And they're going to try to seal it to keep the smell out of our area and then also shut off the air conditioning. So you may want to call and check on us later, make sure we're all right in there. But there are going to be also, Alpha Video will be here doing an update to this particular piece of equipment, the annotation, and they do need to get in and out a little bit of this room. So they're going to have to, what we worked out as of just a couple minutes ago is they will have to go outside and come in the west door over here and come in and make it quick because it will be really strong in here. So we'll see how that goes. And hopefully that project will be done sooner rather than later. It looks very nice, but that is giving us a little bit more disruption in our productivity. So we'll see how tomorrow goes. All right, on to bigger and better things. Elections. I met with Colleen Moran out of the Human Relations Office, the ADA coordinator for the city this week, and we talked about some different ADA requirements for polling places. And she has set up a meeting with me for next week to meet with Peter, is it Blank, Dave? Peter Blank. And he is apparently a world-renowned ADA consultant. In fact, he'll be giving a presentation to this group next month. And he just would like to spend some time talking to me about ADA accessibility in polling places. So I'm excited about that meeting, and also I'm glad that I have the opportunity to sit down one-on-one with him. And then also, it's at the end of September. Colleen is also going to have me attend an ADA accessibility board meeting, and that board is comprised of engineers, architects, and then various individuals that may experience different disabilities that can, talk to me about what troubles they may have experienced with a polling place, whether it's a visual impairment or access for them, and just sit down with that group and talk about what we need to look for polling places. So I think this is a really good start. We're 20 months out. This will give us time to make sure that our polling places are all accessible. I'm hoping we will be able to do that. And then on elections, the pension election will be held in September. I believe the third week is the date, and they do have a date set. I don't know if they've advertised the date especially, but they have asked if I would handle the pension election, just keep it out of HR completely. I would love to do that. I think it's a great opportunity. And then I will be working with representatives from the ASME union, the police union, and the fire union the whole day of the election. And then we will also be counting all the ballots and then taking the results to human resources when we're finished. So a lot going on.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
Thank you, Lori. Questions from council for Lori? I have a couple questions. Yeah, Councilor Staggers, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just didn't quite get the date, Lori, for the election.
Well, you know what? They've picked a date, are looking at a date, the third week of September, but I don't know if that's officially been
Oh, okay.
finalized yet. I know they talked about in the presentation that I attended last week that it would be the third week of September. And I don't believe they've finalized, they're still, working out all the small details. But the election would be from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. that day, and then they will have absentee voting the week before, I believe, for about 4 days. Okay. So it's just like a real election. Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Good. Other questions from council? And I would just comment that as the city's chief election officer, I appreciate that you were asked to do that. That's a great role for you to, work with the entire city in that way. My other question for you then, Lori, is to explain to us, and I know that you and I have talked about it, but let's explain to the public what that annotation system is that the video folks are coming in for.
That is a great question. We have in the podium right here now, we do have a system whereby the same thing that shows up on the screen up there shows up on this screen right here. So when someone's presenting, they can look right here, they can look up there, and everything is the same. We also have the option to open up the annotation system on this, and they can, who's ever presenting can highlight, they can draw on it, they can put circles on it. I don't want to goof up Tom's report, or I would do some of this. But the issue that we're having is that during a council meeting, someone watching on their channel at home, CityLink, cannot see what's being annotated on the screen. And I know oftentimes people will reference, especially with zoning or planning items, they will have a map and say, well, it's this section right here. Or, Mark Cotter, I know in some of his presentations will circle and emphasize an item. And those watching, on TV or on TV, I guess, cannot see that. And so what they're trying to do is work it out so that what we see here and on this screen also will show up on the televised broadcast as well.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? Great, thanks, Lori.
All right,
appreciate
thanks.
it. Jim David, Legislative Operations Manager.
Good afternoon. Earlier this month, the South Dakota Municipal League did approve a couple items of interest to Sioux Falls. The first one dealt with firearms within a municipal building. They gave the first round approval to this item, and it will move ahead to the full board of their organization. They also did endorse some legislative changes to state statute that dealt with regional wastewater systems. Within this, right now in current law, it only allows the customers of this wastewater system to be charged for the use. Changes to this legislation will allow for the customers to be charged for past capital costs and costs for new capacity. And the customers are cities, rural subdivisions, and other political entities. The South Dakota Municipal League also offered to set up a meeting between members of this body, the South Dakota Retailers Association, and other interests revolving the South Dakota's underage drinking law and how cities can enforce that law by those habitual offenders in the business community. And we hope to get that meeting sometime in the fall. So if anyone is interested in participating in that, please let me know. And also there is the annual conference of the Municipal League that's scheduled for October 3rd through the 5th. So if anyone is interested in participating in that, they want their hotel room set up, please let me know.
Great, thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Anderson.
Jim, could you expand a little bit on that, charging the regional wastewater customers?
Well, I know that they're going to be talking about that later on in the meeting, so I'm not exactly familiar with all the ins and outs of that, but I know that as Sioux Falls wants to grow a wastewater regional system, right now they do serve, I believe, Brandon, but wanting to expand that further, this will allow them to do that and also to recoup that cost that will be used in developing that infrastructure. But I'll probably defer to Mark and his group on that.
Thank you.
If I might, Councilor Anderson, I know that was actually a Sioux Falls-based idea. Could we ask,
Yes.
could I, just off the top of our head, Mark Cotter, would you come forward and just give us the 2-second version of that so that we relate it to our legislative priorities?
Certainly. Thank you, Council Chair. And council members, we did build off the memo that we sent you back in July on the progress of the wastewater regionalization study and essentially the results that came out of that study. So we know that to try to tie it into next year's legislation, that to strengthen the current language in the state code in order to implement the recommendations of the study and clean up some other areas of the state code. We took it forward to Municipal League Public Works Committee and essentially builds off the same work that's been done in the past with water systems, landfill systems, and now wastewater systems. And so it should be a really good tie-in tonight to keep the council informed and also the timeline that lies ahead of us now here for about the next year.
Good. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
Jim, I'm going to ask you back other questions for Jim regarding his report. Then I just wanted to touch base again regarding legislative priorities. We've talked about that briefly, and you and I had talked about those items that have come through the Municipal League system. And remembering for the public, the Municipal League is a lobbying arm for all the municipalities in South Dakota. That those items that have come through that system are then up for consideration for us to put into our legislative priorities for the 2013 session. Do you and I, or as a group, do we want to bring that to the work session, or how would you like us to consider our legislative priorities?
Well, right now we really don't have too many of those issues. I know we've talked to the two counties, the school district on their legislative priorities for possible inclusion to within our platform. We really haven't received too much yet, but I'm sure as more of these bodies begin to take in these legislative items that there might be more, but really it could be an informational meeting, it could be a work session. It's really whatever the council prefers to deal with legislative priorities for the upcoming session.
Okay. Council, have any comments about how we've done them sort of in informational sessions previously? You want to do a working session? Okay. I'm hearing from Councilor Rolfing under his breath that he wants a working session for that, and which is fine. Okay. Are other memories better than mine? We'll put it on the agenda for an upcoming work session.
Work
then.
session. Okay.
Yes. Good. Thank you. And if you have legislative priorities then that you want considered for that list, I would urge council members to get in contact with Jim so we can move that forward.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Audit Committee report of the meeting on August 2nd. Councilor Jamieson.
Thank you. We did have a Audit Committee meeting on August 2nd. We reviewed the quality of life bonds. We didn't find any irregularities, but Rich is here to answer any other questions or give a further detailed explanation.
Well, we have a request in to present that report, I think, on September 11th at the Informational, so full council should get that report at that time, and that was the main business item, I think. So. Okay.
On further discussion, there was questions about the contract that we had with the South Dakota Junior Football League, and that we had lived up to our part of the agreement, but what had South Dakota Junior Football done to fulfill their end of the agreement? We're working on some of those final details, but best we can see, there really isn't any specifics in the agreement, just more of an understanding. And I think we've kind of outlined and gotten to the bottom of it, but I think one of the constituents that was here was asking for further details, and we're working on that.
Okay. Questions for Councilor Jamieson. Councilor Rolfing?
Yes. You might want to mention, too, about the vacancy we have in that committee. I don't know if you want to do that at this point or...
Well, sure. We're still looking for an individual to participate from the public on that board. We can get by without them, but the addition of one other person would fill out the committee. So anybody looking to participate, they're sure welcome.
Are there special requirements for someone to be on that committee, the audit committee?
Well, what the committee would really enjoy is somebody who has some accounting and audit experience. That would be best.
Okay.
But a willingness to serve would be foremost.
That's the beginning. How might they participate in that? How would they, do they need to call you, or is there a form they fill out? How would they go about that, Councilor Jamieson?
Best way they could get involved is either contacting myself or any of the audit committee members or Rich Oaksall, and we'll work it from there.
Great. Good. Thank you. Other questions about the audit committee meeting or questions of Councilor Jamieson? Good. Thank you very much. Moving on to council open discussion, I'm going to begin as chair. I said earlier that Councilor Aguilar is not with us this evening, and it is a family emergency, and she really does want to be here for the texting ban vote. And so Councilor Anderson and I would like to ask the council to make a deferral on our regular agenda at 7 o'clock. Councilor Anderson and I have been with Councilor Aguilar on the Public Services Committee, and she's been our biggest proponent for that particular project, and so we'd really like her to be part of that conversation. So just kind of a heads up that we would be asking to amend the regular agenda at 7 o'clock. And so that was it. That's what I have for open discussion. Others, council members? Councilor Karski.
Most of the counselors, or I guess I should say all of the counselors, will notice a glass today, courtesy little gift from the Lewis and Clark Regional Water System. Councilor Jameson and I took the time to go down there this morning for their ribbon cutting for the facility. Truly state-of-the-art and the newest of its kind in the country. You will not see too many of these types of facilities built. About $100 million, a little over $90 million facility. Currently providing 7 million gallons of water today to Sioux Falls, which is about a third of our current usage. And about a third of the town is seeing that water in their kitchen sinks and in their households. So it's a great facility, some time well spent, and just a little gift for all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other open discussion. Councilor Anderson.
I just want to talk real quickly about an event that's happening Sunday. Sioux Falls has always been known as a very giving community. I have a couple friends who for 12 years now have been putting on an event for Feeding South Dakota. It's called Jam Against Hunger. It's at Terrace Park between 1 and 5 on Sunday. Even if you don't like the music, stop by, drop off a non-perishable. Thank you.
Thank you. Other open discussion from council. All right. Good start to the afternoon. Let's move on then to presentations, starting with the July monthly financial report by Tracy Turbeck, Director of Finance, or Tom Huber, his assistant. I should have looked.
Impersonator.
There you go.
Tom Huber with the Finance Office. Good afternoon, councilors. Here for the July monthly financial report. Start off with good news, and when you look at the overall economy that we always start out with, you continue to see the good news. We use three primary indicators to tell us about or assess our economic conditions. We use jobs, construction, and spending. So as you will see, the city continues to enjoy very favorable economic growth. Looking first at the Sioux Falls unemployment rate, it continues to reflect the positive growth that being experienced by the city and the city's economy. The unemployment rate of 3.9% compares very favorably to both 2011 and 2010. And as is true for South Dakota in general, our unemployment rate is also well below that of most other places around the country, and that of the national unemployment rate, which is well above 8%. So the city is still creating jobs moving forward. Another measure of our economic health is our building permit activity, which is measured by valuations of permits issued from the Building Services Office. It started out, as you can see from the chart, much stronger than the previous 2 years, the green bar representing 2012. And as you can see, that year-to-date activity has continued to build as the year has progressed, with year-to-date permit valuations of $253 million. July's valuations are 62% ahead of where the city was through July of 2011. Our last indicators are on spending, which was measured by our sales tax collections. As you can see, that the 12 long-term perspective that we look at, the 12-month rolling rate of 5.5% continues to show solid economic activity. This is one of our bellwether measures because it gives us a good perspective on the strength of consumer and business spending. As you can also see from the chart, the rate has been very stable over the last 2 years. So a good reflection of the health of the local economy. We also look at the entertainment tax. It gives us a little bit different perspective of the economic strength of the city. As it's what we consider to be on discretionary spending, such as lodging, dining out, alcoholic beverages, ticketed events. So as you can see on the 12-month rolling growth rate, it's a very strong 6.5% through the month of July. So what does all the economic growth that we've just talked about translate into for the city's finances? As one would expect, it's meant strong growth for our revenues year to date for the general fund, which is what we're showing here on this chart. Of course, led by sales tax, which is our most important revenue source, and by building permitting that we discussed. Overall, general revenues continue to track very well to last year, as they're up 7.1% year to date, and also tracking well within budget, because except for interest rates, all revenues are, as you can see in the details, all revenues are either meeting or exceeding budget expectations. On the expense side, again, they're also trending favorably to budget. Given another topic of this afternoon, snow removal is, of course, a major component of our general operating budget. And as always, it helps to start out with little snow. Certainly has a positive impact on the budget. So, but as you can see from the trend on general fund expenditures at 4%, it's much lower than the rate of growth on revenues, which is always a good news story. So I know you have 2 more presentations to follow, so I'll stop there and certainly be happy to answer any questions on the report.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Questions for Tom? Well, an easy afternoon for you. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate your report. As always, it's available on siouxfalls.org for those of you that aren't with us this afternoon. Moving along in presentations, we're doing the Comprehensive Wastewater Regionalization Study with Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works, and his crew.
All right, thank you again, councilors. We've looked forward to bringing you the results and recommendations of the wastewater regionalization study. As Councilor Karski said this morning, it was quite an event this morning to be able to see Lewis and Clark really commensurate the actions that they've taken over the last nearly 25 years to bring this large idea forward and actually start delivering water. Similar cases with regionalizing wastewater. These things don't happen overnight. They need to be well thought out, so there's fair and equitable policies that are in place. And I think what tonight that you'll hear is that we've made some good strides to that point. One of the things that as communities grow, like the City of Sioux Falls and communities around us like Brandon, T, Harrisburg, Hartford, Crooks, those communities really within a 10-mile distance of our city limits are growing at very proactive rates. The first utility that goes in when you start to develop a piece of land is sanitary sewer. The distance away or the ability to actually serve an area with sanitary sewer is the first question that communities have to answer. The City of Sioux Falls has been very forward with thinking out decades into the future on how and where we'll serve our sewer next. And the communities around us are really starting to have to take those same steps. One of the other aspects that's happening is that regulations to collect and treat wastewater are only getting more and more stringent, and the capital costs to pay for these infrastructure improvements are very intense. And so the timing was really at a critical mass back in 2009, late 2009, when Harrisburg was growing at a pace that they were already filling up their lagoons faster than what their design life was. And so to address it, they wrote a feasibility study that looked at a number of things from expanding their lagoons to moving their lagoons, to building new treatment technologies, to treat their waste, or in fact pumping it to the city of Sioux Falls. Their feasibility study did show that the lowest cost option and the best for the region would be to pump their wastewater to Sioux Falls. The city of Sioux Falls has been in the regional wastewater business for a long time. We've been treating Renner and Prairie Meadows wastewater since the 1970s, and we're nearing a 20-year commitment with Brandon. And so this feasibility study kicked off an intense discussion on what's the appropriate way and the way forward as communities connect into the City of Sioux Falls system, and what's that appropriate value to charge for not only the use per 1,000 gallons, but also that long-term capacity. So tonight, Trent Luber has been running this project for us, and he'll take you through a series of slides. And as Jim David already said, is to make sure that we met the legislative schedule. We essentially took the memo that we sent you in July and took the Public Works Committee through the recommendations and results of the study, and did receive unanimous support from the Public Works Committee to move forward with legislative changes. And they're not specific to this region. It's statewide. That just allows another option for one community to work with another community on how they collect and treat their wastewater. So without further ado, we'll bring up Trent Lubers and take you through the presentation.
Good afternoon, City Council. I feel like I must have done a pretty good job of educating everyone. I think I can just jump to the end to the questions, because Jim handled the municipal league portion and Mark did a really good job of setting things up. So we'll move through the next few slides. Mark touched on the growth in the region and why it's important for us to take a look at regionalization. Growth in the region is good for all of us, and so we need to look at how that growth can impact Sioux Falls and the growth can impact the surrounding communities. Regulation is going to be huge for the surrounding communities. A lagoon treatment system, as new regulations come on board and water quality standards come on board, is no longer going to be adequate to meet regulatory standards. And as Mark had mentioned, wastewater infrastructure is very capitally intensive. Treatment facilities are very expensive. So some of the benefits, shared costs, economy of scale, something we've all learned about as far as sharing the costs and spreading the costs over a larger group of individuals, communities would reduce the cost for all. Maximizing the use of public dollars. As these communities see new regulations coming on board, they're going to go after the same funding sources that the City of Sioux Falls would. So from a regional perspective, going after federal grants or SRF loans and those types of things, those aren't endless dollars or sources of dollars to help offset the large cost of the capital infrastructure. So maximizing the use of public dollars by coordinating or consolidating with a regional approach should make the costs or the public dollars that are available to get more work done. Rate stabilization, if you reduce the cost, certainly it's going to have a stabilizing effect on rates. And that economy of scale certainly does control those growth-related costs for each community. Just wanted to put up a slide that looks at the entire group of stakeholders that we've contacted and worked with throughout this process. Sioux Falls Mayor and City Council have been involved. We've provided a couple of briefings as we've moved through the process. Southeast Council of Governments, Department of Environment and Natural Resources, our regulator, actually committed financially to this study. They provided a $75,000 grant to help get this study underway. East Dakota Water Development District, clearly water quality is an important end goal for them, and so they participated with a $50,000 grant to assist us performing this study. We've worked with the Infrastructure Review and Advisory Board in essentially all the communities within a 10-mile radius around the City of Sioux Falls. And I went through the list and I went through the list and we checked and I missed one. The City of Corson, I don't want to slate the City of Corson. They were contacted and I missed them on this list. So I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned them also. Comprehensive regionalization study. Just a few milestones. Being a regional provider is not new for the City of Sioux Falls. Mark mentioned that before we built the existing treatment facility, which was designed in 1979, constructed in the early 80s, between 81 and 86, We were already providing regional wastewater to the Renner Sanitary District and the Prairie Meadow Sanitary District. Brandon came on board in 1994, and Harrisburg came on board in 2010. Actually, we signed the agreement with Harrisburg at the end of 2009, and I believe they connected in 2010. So you can see that there was a series of meetings and processes that took place starting in April of 2010, and there's just a couple of key ones I want to highlight. Is in February and October of 2011, we brought you a really detailed, long 50-slide presentation for both buckets for where we would like to collect money for the regional system. And we also presented a memo to you in July. In March of 2012, we sat down with the Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. He came out and met with his entire team, the financial side and the regulatory side, and we went through the regional concept. And we received a lot of support from them as far as moving forward and them seeing this as the path of the future. Mark had mentioned the Municipal League presentation, and then we're here tonight to give you an update. So some key concepts or takeaways as we move through the presentation that I want you to think about as we move through the next few slides is governance and financial policies. One of the key outputs of the study is a series of governance and financial policies as far as how the rates and the charges that are associated with the regional system are calculated. There are sound, nationally accepted financial policies. And then there's a governance piece also as far as when we would start looking at adding capital assets and how the capacity is acquired by regional communities. The other key concepts are the City of Sioux Falls will retain ownership of the system. This is not a regional system in the concept of let's say Met Council in the Twin Cities area where everyone owns the system and it's a regional governing body. The City of Sioux Falls is 96% of the regional system and will be for some time to come. And there's a substantial investment by our customers into that system, so we believe that we need to retain ownership of the system at this time. Sioux Falls does, however, consider itself a regional customer. So as charges are, for the regional component, as charges are developed either from a capacity charge or a rate charge, Sioux Falls will charge itself for that regional component the same thing it would for an outside customer. There's no requirement to connect to the regional system. Essentially what the regional system is it's a series of guidelines and financial principles that have an output of what the cost is on a volumetric charge and an output on what each unit of capacity is. So that as an outside community that's reaching that growth point where they need to add to their wastewater systems, they can evaluate the cost to coming into the regional system or going out on their own. But it remains a local decision for each one of them. And again, I just wanted to stress that the regional philosophy is a more effective use of capital dollars. So the first step as you go through the regional system is what's regional? The City of Sioux Falls has 22 lift stations. We have a treatment facility. We have 800 miles of pipes in the ground. Is all of that regional? It's not. What you do is you take a look at the assets that have a reasonable expectation that they're going to convey or treat water from a potential regional customer in that 10-mile boundary around Sioux Falls. And so after you identify those regional assets, which essentially are outside lying large interceptor pipes and then those big trunk sewers that go through the City of Sioux Falls, there's a flow equalization basin and the treatment facility. So then as you do that, you allocate the costs, the capital costs and operating costs to the regional customers, including the City of Sioux Falls, for that regional portion. So I just wanted to show this slide to highlight again that the purple lines on there, it's really difficult to see. There's surrounding communities around the City of Sioux Falls, but the purple lines are essentially present, and there's some yellow and orange lines and future regional assets that have the potential to be regional assets. So there's a future wastewater treatment plant on there. There's a forced main from the East Side Sanitary Sewer System, but it's not the entire East Side Sanitary Sewer System. And then those major trunks as they go around the city. Don't need to spend a lot of time on this one. So there are two buckets or areas that we need to collect money for the regional system. The first one is the operation and maintenance of the existing system that you have in the treatment facility. And that's the dollar amount that you collect through rates. And so that regional allocation of rate revenue that's required it needs to be collected from all the regional communities. How do we do that? We've talked about it a little bit in the past through the rate modeling presentations, but what we're applying is a postage stamp approach. The way we've collected from the regional customers that we have today is the amount of the infrastructure that you use, collection system, treatment facility, is how we collect rates. So the fact that Renner Sanitary District comes through a lot of the collection system and two lift stations and then comes to the treatment facility and uses the treatment facility means that they have a higher rate than the city of Brandon, who has a force main that goes directly to the treatment facility, and they don't use any of the asset or the collection system. What the postage stamp approach does is we're all regional customers and we're all treated equally. That's exactly the way we treat our customers in the city of Sioux Falls. If you live in the farthest southwest part of the city, the farthest away from the wastewater treatment facility, you pay the same rate as somebody who lives across the street from the wastewater treatment facility. So it's an approach that we've practiced as far as collecting rates inside the city, and it's an approach that we're recommending that we collect for rates outside of the city. So what does that base rate for the regional component mean? It's $3.85 per 1,000 gallons. But there are some opportunities for credits for the regional communities also. There's a credit for equalization. And what equalization means and why it has a value to the regional system is if you can discharge to the regional system at an off-peak time, for instance, in the middle of the night when the pipe is practically empty, there are lower operating costs, there are lower capital costs, and there are lower treatment costs for that because you don't have to build for that capacity. If everybody discharged as they used, it's in the industry it's called the diurnal curve, how we use water, and it goes in a peak and then it goes down. And if everybody wanted to discharge and not equalize their flow or flatline it, then you have to build the pipe bigger. So if they're taking advantage of the pipe in the plant when it's smaller, there's value to the system and there's value to all the other customers. And the same principle is also there for treatment. So if you provide some level of treatment, there's a credit there also because there's infrastructure and operating costs associated with treatment that aren't used or aren't used, excuse me, on a peaking basis. And so there's value to all the regional customers. And so there's a credit placed there. And the final component of rates is a rate of return. And the rate of return is built in primarily for the city of Sioux Falls. And what this is a risk premium. The city of Sioux Falls is leveraging capital, and they're leveraging capital into infrastructure. And so the city of Sioux Falls gets some rate of return from the regional customers on that. So what it does is it essentially has a lowering effect on Sioux Falls' rate. So we start at $3.85, but after the rate of return, our rates would be lower on a regional basis. The city of Sioux Falls essentially is taking on the risk and the burden of that wastewater and the environmental regulation associated with that wastewater, and so that rate of return is intended to compensate the city for the investment in the infrastructure and those risks. The other part of the collection or costs associated are the capacity costs. Mark had mentioned it earlier, and one of the things that we wanted to determine is what is a unit of capacity worth? Well, first of all, what is a unit of capacity? A unit of capacity, as we define it in this study, is an equivalent residential unit, one home, one single-family home. And we measure that by the size of a water meter that's in a home. So an equivalent residential unit is essentially a 5/8 inch or a 1-inch meter in a home. And so that's how we calculate what the capacity is, because they're going to have an equivalent residential unit discharge or equal component of flow to the wastewater treatment system. So that's how we measure a unit of capacity. So what's that worth to the system? And what does that unit of capacity cost? Well, there are two things that you need to take a look at, and this study takes a look at as we do that. Reimbursement to the existing customers for the cost of the existing facilities, past contributions, value of the unused capacity and costs associated with loans, and then improvement. Improvement is the portion of capacity that's going to get developed as that new capacity comes on board. So that system development charge, that charge for each unit of capacity, has those two components built into it. The system development charge, the output from this study is $2,391 per ERU. For each equivalent residential unit or single-family home, that's what that unit of capacity is worth. Breaking that down a little bit further, you can see how we broke down the improvement in the reimbursement component. So the existing customers are getting reimbursed each time a new customer comes on board, $1,287 for reimbursement for that existing capital or capacity. The collection of the SDC, I want to stress this, the collection and how we collect that is a local decision. And communities can collect this in any way that they deem necessary and their boards deem required. The City of Sioux Falls has been collecting our capital costs through a cost recovery system. And that's what Public Works is recommending as we go forward, is we maintain that existing cost recovery mechanism to collect the capital costs of putting that infrastructure in the ground. Mark and Jim had both mentioned the legislative changes, and just going back to build upon this a little bit, the legislation, it's 94826, and the legislation is somewhat vague as far as the reimbursement component and recovering the capital costs from that capacity that a user, an outside user, is using. And so what we're trying to do with this legislation is not only charge for use of the sewer system, but to better define what capital costs are and work that through the legislation so that we're very solid moving forward as far as what can be charged for. A few recommendations going forward. Our three recommendations, our main recommendations are we pursue the changes to SDCL with the Municipal League as we work through that process. As we hopefully receive approval from the legislature, we would bring forward to this body ordinance changes to accept the regional methodology on how we collect, and then also the adoption of the rates and charges as we bring those forward. And the next slide actually is just a schedule or a pathway for us to move forward. I think in the next 4 months or so, we'll be working on those changes to SDCL with the Legislative Research Council and SDML. We'll also be looking at our existing contracts with our existing regional customers and modifying those contracts as necessary, amending the existing service contracts for the new volumetric rates that we had showed you earlier in June with the rate studies. Beyond that, in January and March, we'll work to forward the legislation and advocate to get the legislative changes with the legislature as they're in session. In March of 2013, pending that approval, we'll bring forward to you those changes that we would like to see in the ordinance and those changes for accepting the rates and charges. And then in July 2013, when the state law goes into effect, we would start implementing the system development charges and the regional rate charges. Beyond that, I am open for questions that you may have.
Thank you, Trent. Questions from council for Trent? Councilor Staggers.
Yes. Trent, I guess I'm wondering why we're so eager to do this. Now, I know the feds love regionalization. Is the idea is we can get more money from the feds, or, I mean, people normally wouldn't say, hey, let's get out there and let's regionalize this or that or whatever. What?
Well, I think regionalization from an economy of scale and lowering the costs for our consumers from a rate standpoint, if we're all sharing in the costs, that has an impact on a volumetric rate basis, and it has an impact on every one of our customers because more people are sharing in those costs. And I would say that if Harrisburg or some other community was willing to build a treatment facility with 40 million gallons of capacity and they came to City of Sioux Falls, because we're looking in the next 10 to 15 years at building a wastewater treatment facility, if they came to Sioux Falls and said, we're looking at regionalization as a concept, I would tell you that the City of Sioux Falls would look at that very closely, because it may financially be a better move for the City of Sioux Falls, just like these communities are taking a look at it. So everyone benefits from that lowering effect because you're spreading those costs out.
Okay, so if I can just clarify, we want to have lower rates for the citizens of Sioux Falls?
It'll be lower rates for everyone in the region.
Even for our competitors? Because Harrisburg is a competitor for Sioux Falls, Brandon's a competitor. I mean, there are other cities, and they're trying to grow and prosper and so forth, and we are trying to also at the same time. I was interested in a comment that you said that Sioux Falls will retain ownership of the system, 96% of the system. At this time, is it foreseen in the future that what Sioux Falls has built up will eventually just become part of this, some regional that's not owned by the city of Sioux Falls. I guess I'm a little concerned that in the future we might be giving up our infrastructure here when it comes to the sewers and so forth, and now we have a part of this metro government or whatever the case might be, or regional government or whatever, and we'll lose control of our own infrastructure here.
Sure, and I think that would be a concern, and the policies are not written to allow that to happen in any way, shape, or form. And ultimately, it's your decision as a body to decide whether we would do that or not. It's not envisioned that that would happen. And for the foreseeable future, Sioux Falls is certainly going to be the largest part of the system. And I can't see that that would happen in a way that somehow the citizens of Sioux Falls and the residents of Sioux Falls who have made a substantial investment over the years into the system wouldn't be compensated somehow. But again, that decision and that decision would be something that this body would have to make. That's not something that.
But I'm concerned we might be moving in that direction.
Could I clarify as chair, Councilor Sagers? I'm not sure I understand your question. I understood it to mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trent, that Sioux Falls is currently 96% of the system itself.
We're 96% of the flow contribution of the contribution to the system, and we will be for the foreseeable future. We will be, for lack of a better word, we'll be the 800-pound gorilla. We'll be the biggest contributor to the regional system. So
we're not only the biggest contributor, we are also the owner of the system, and that will not change unless we were to, the council and some future council would change that ownership.
It's not envisioned that that ownership would change, no.
Okay, thank you. Does that help you, Councilor Staggers?
A little bit, but there's just one other
yes,
question I have here. On your slide, it says Sioux Falls considers itself a regional customer. I never want us to consider ourselves a regional customer. It's our system. And these other entities that are going to be using our system, yeah, they're our regional customers. I mean, I'm a little concerned, once again, that the view is we're going to eventually go down the road of transforming our own system that we build up with Sioux Falls taxpayers' money, eventually become morphed into this regional where we'll have all kinds of different board of directors, and we'll have each city having one vote or whatever the case might be. Maybe this is not the appropriate time to say this, but it's kind of like with Lewis and Clark. This is a regional system. We're the biggest contributor, we're the biggest user of the water, and we have one vote. So this is not our system, Lewis and Clark. But we want to keep our sewer system ours and not transform it into something else.
I would agree with you. I think that's fair.
Thank you. Other questions from council? All right. Thank you, Trent. We appreciate your time and your information. Moving on with presentations, Snowgates presentation by Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works, and Galen Huber, Street and Fleet.
Good afternoon, Galen Huber, Street Fleet Manager for Public Works. Back in July, you would have received a memo from me basically stating some of the facts that we ran through with the 2011-2012 winter season. And we felt it wasn't fair that we just sent you a memo, that you probably would have some questions. And since I didn't receive any, I thought it would take some time here at Informational to allow you to ask me any questions that you would like. I just want to briefly go over just a few of the things that the memo had in it. First of all, the City of Sioux Falls annually receives on average 43 inches. Last year we received 15.9. Since 1948, when records that I could track, that's the second least amount of snow that we've ever received in the November to March timeframe. The least amount that the city ever received was 11 inches. This was 15.9. The second bullet on that is we received basically 2/3 of our snow for the entire season last year in two events, one in January and one in February. We had 4.6 and 5.6, which were actually snow events, and we actually used the gates at that particular time. And the third anomaly, I'm going to call it, is that we've seen an unusual amount of plowbacks in the Snowgate area. The first snow event in January, the winds were blowing at 16 miles an hour. We've received 4.6 inches. And the second snow event in February, the winds were blowing 26 to 31 miles an hour, and we had 5.6, and we received a high number of plowbacks in the snowgate area, not in the control area. And I find that a little bit curious, but that's what the data shows. And so it was just an unusual year. March turned out to be the warmest, one of the warmest Marches that we've ever had, and so the whole season was kind of different for us. I would say that statistically, the data that we received is very inconclusive. It's hard to put it into a model and say this is how it will work. Snowgates will work in the city of Sioux Falls. I just find a hard time that would actually work, and so with that, I guess I got tired of the small little places. I want to go bigger, and so we're going to put 6 snow gates out there. I'm looking to the north. I'm looking a couple to the west. I'm looking southwest, southeast, and east, and try and put my hands around this 800-pound gorilla and find out finally, once and for all, if they're good for the city of Sioux Falls. Before I open it up for questions, I just want to tell you that last week we had an EOC Emergency Operations Center. We meet every other month, and Todd Heitkamp from the National Weather Service gives us his 30, 60, 90-day forecast. I want to give you a little bit of a highlight what's we're looking forward through, at least through the end of the year. The 30, 60, 90 forecast for the National Weather Service says above normal temperatures, below normal precip. That puts us through the end of October. So what you got now is what we're going to get, is what they're basically saying. The drought persistence map for the state of South Dakota through the end of November still has Sioux Falls in a persistent drought. That's putting us through the end of November. One thing that I've learned over the last 6 years and with snow removal is some of the terms that meteorologists use, and what they'll tell you is the atmosphere has to be saturated in order for it to hit the ground. And so it's going to take a time for the atmosphere to really saturate for it to hit the ground. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I had to hedge, going through the end of the year, it's looking like it may be a fairly mild winter going in, at least into November and December, because it has to saturate the air in order for it to work. And I don't think in November they're going to flip the switch on and all of a sudden we're getting lots of snow. January, February might, but again, I'm basing our information on a normal winter, and hopefully if we have a normal winter, I can give you better data next year on what these things can really do for the city of Sioux Falls. And so with that, I'll open it up to any questions you may have, and hopefully I can answer them for you.
Great, thank you, Galen. Questions from council? Councilor Rolfing.
I don't know how to put this delicately, but, and I don't mean delicately, but how did these first snow gates get started?
It was actually before my time. Before I came to Public Works, they've been, the discussion within the city of Sioux Falls, with the residents of Sioux Falls, has been out there for quite a few years, many years in fact. And goes back to the previous administration. They talked about them and talked about them. And I guess, the reference is always made to North Dakota. North Dakota has snow gates up in some of their cities up there. And everybody would point to North Dakota and say, if they have them, why can't we have them? And we could never, ever take a look and say, if it's good for the city of Sioux Falls, because it's good for Bismarck, because it's good for Jamestown, because it's good for Minot, why isn't it good for us? We can never say yes or no. And I think to really answer the question and answer the argument, is it good for the city of Sioux Falls? You have to physically try them in the city of Sioux Falls. So I think what we really wanted to do was, okay, let's see if they work. If they work, great. We can decide if we want them. If they don't work, great. At least we know that they don't work. And I think that's how the process eventually got going, where we got snow gates.
But the first ones were ordered by who?
The city purchased them.
By, and whose authority?
Mark,
yours?
Director.
Okay, not through the council, right?
Councilor, they were purchased through the fleet account, and that's where we purchased them from. And so the cost of those units fall under that threshold of what they cost to purchase and need council authority.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Without, yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Jameson.
I didn't realize we'd be going some of that distance, but if I could remind Councilor Rolfing that the decision to purchase those gates was, we were not made aware of that until some state of the city address of some sort. We heard it, and it fell underneath the requirements of council approval at that time. And it's part of what led to the council to urge the existence of the ordinance that required spending like that to be approved by the council. It was just one of those items. But if I could state, I was in that test area last year, and if I could put my request in that we be in that test area again. I ran a re-election campaign just a few months ago, and I did not find anybody who objected to snow gates. Now, my district was in that test area, and certainly only had a small piece of the weather to deal with, but if I could request that we be put back in that test area again, please.
We're looking at those areas as I speak now, and we're trying to finalize with GIS. We need to make sure that, again, this is a statistical analysis, that the control site has the same number of miles as the Snowgate, the test site. And so to get 6 different areas out there, we want to make sure that we represent the city of Sioux Falls as a whole, all 73 square miles. And so I will tell you that every inch of the 73 square miles will be analyzed and determine which one fits into that. And if it is your area again, you're welcome.
I can tell you now his doesn't, but he'd be willing to pay for it.
Other questions from council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Galen. Just wondering, how many snow gates are we using to test?
We'll have a total of 6 this winter. We had 3 last winter, and we had 2 the winter before.
Oh, okay. And then the cost per snow gate?
This year, the 3 that we are purchasing now are $5,850 a piece.
And then how many different companies are we using? Are we just using one company, Snowgate, or?
No, we have a combination of Ironics and Hinkies. That's the 2 major players in the Snowgate market.
And just one final question. Have we ever tried to get these snow gates free from them?
Have we what?
From companies, get them free. In other words, we say, hey, we are testing to see if we're going to buy snow gates. And if you'd like to put yours in, we'd be more than happy to test yours out too.
Well, I think that through the process of the bid process, we had to bid these things out. And I think if they really wanted to do that, they would put a $0 amount in there. So far, they haven't wanted to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions from council? I do have one, Galen, something that you said about the areas with the snow gates when it was those particularly windy events. The areas with snow gates actually had more callbacks than the areas that didn't have snow gates. I don't know what a callback is, and how do you deal with that then?
What it is basically when you go out there and you plow the street open, the citizens will call us and say, hey, my street is plugged. And we go out there and take a look at it, and if it's blowing shut, or another way we'll go back for a plowback is if there is vehicles sitting alongside the curb and we go around them. Then what happens is you have a windrow of snow that's sitting out in the middle of the street because we had to go around that vehicle. Once that vehicle is moved, they'll call us to come and push that to the curb. So roughly, that when I say a plowback, it's one of those 2 things. What we were seeing in this past winter for plowbacks was the wind was blowing the areas shut, and we had to go back out and physically open the streets back up again. And that's all part of the data that was collected in the Snowgate site and in the control site. We track that time because that's all part of it. If of the cost of doing snow removal, so we track that time. But what I find that's strange about that is we got a very high number of callbacks for plowbacks in the gated area, and we didn't get that in the control site. Now, it could be the terrain, could be the site where we're at and the way it is. One of the sites that Councilor Jameson was talking about was his area. The houses, the area isn't completely developed. There's openings out there, and you'll get a funneling and tunneling and eddying effect where there's openings, and then you get restrictions. And so you can get a lot of different effects with the snow drifting patterns. And the only thing I can think of is that as the wind was blowing through those areas, it was getting more of a effect where it was drifting it over the road, and we were getting the citizens calling us to come back and open it back up again. Whereas the control site, which was to the north and west of the plow site, you think that would get hit too. We didn't see that problem.
Interesting.
Now, and again, North Dakota they tell me that you'll get a narrowing effect of the streets with snow gates because of the science of pushing snow is you need momentum to push them into the parking strip. With snow gates, you have to slow down in order to allow the hydraulic system to work. You're going up and down and up and down, and then if you go too fast and you have a full mow board full of snow, you'll get it to funnel over the mow board, and then it doesn't do. You're not doing a service, so you have to slow it down. So the snow, when you open up the gate, the snow goes against and then drops down. You don't get it to roll over because you don't have the momentum. But since both of these snowstorms acted as a first snowstorm, and what I mean by that is there was no snow in the parking strip. There was plenty of room for us to dump the snow in there. That's why I find it so strange that we're getting these callbacks in the gated area and not in the control area. I don't have an explanation for that, but again, it was a strange winter.
Yes, yeah, we all give you a strange winter. Thank you, Galen. Councilor Karski.
Galen, what are these studies costing us each year? We did one 2010, now 2011, and now again 2012, our third year of study. What are we paying per year for studies?
Well, basically what it costs what the snow gates are. This year we're purchasing 3 more, so that's 5850, so that's roughly 17,500. So that's in addition of what we would have done. In addition to that, we are putting GPS units on 12 motor graders this year, because we have 6 with gates and we have 6 that we're running in the control site that are running opposite of them. And to measure the efficiency of each one of those, we put a GPS unit on that. That's approximately another $30,000 for those GPS units in the program that runs that for us. And it's really a good system. It plugs right into the engine. You can see exactly how much fuel you're burning. You can see when the gate's up, when the gate's down. You can see where the motor grader is actually at. So it's a very good system. I like it a lot, and I think it has good data for us. And then the other additional cost to the test would be the time that it takes to plow the city out. If the difference between if I didn't use snow gates versus snow gates, that additional time I have in labor and fuel is going to add to the cost. So that's basically, I can't tell you an exact dollar amount, but those are the factors that contribute to the additional cost of doing the test.
So this year, equipment costs are $45,000, roughly, $47,000.
For the snow gates?
Snow gates and the GIS tracking equipment, et cetera.
Exactly. Yep. The $30,000 for the GPS units and the $17,000 for the snow gates. Yep. And then the additional fuel, additional time that it will take to do that.
And we don't have an idea what those costs are, what it's costing us for increased time and labor, et cetera, over time?
Well, we have data. We have data that shows what the additional cost that we had 2 years ago, and we collected data from last year, but I don't feel that the data that we collected last year is necessarily good data. I mean, I got numbers that show what it took to plow out the city last year in the snow gate area versus the non-snow gate area. It took 40% longer to do the snow gate area than it did the control site if you conclude the plowbacks in it to clean the entire street off. And it took 50% more fuel to do that. That's the numbers I got. But again, I don't think that those numbers are, I think the winter was so strange for us that those numbers are true representations of what it's going to cost us if we go with this system within the city.
Okay. And last question, if I may. Do we have a plan if this winter brings another inconclusive study?
Yeah, I think we're going to make a decision. I don't know. Yeah. I'm going to defer to Mark on that.
Yeah, I think we prefaced it too in the closing statement of the memo that assuming we have normal precipitation, so we can actually get some usable data, so then we can actually present you with the facts. That's truly our intention. We normally don't have to wait for a light winter in South Dakota, and last year was obviously such an anomaly. But I would expect if we have a reasonable amount of precipitation, it just builds on the data that we've already captured the last 2 years, and then we'll be able to present you with a recommendation. And if I could, Chair, just to build on to one comment that Councilor Ruffing had said about the purchase, the City of Sioux Falls, when there's questions about different products or we have the opportunity to try things, we do move forward with different pilot projects. You know, Techcrete was one. Techcrete was one where we bought a very small amount and we implemented it and tested it, found out that it worked really good, so then we ultimately purchased the machine the next year and then more product. We do that on a number of factors. We've done it on asphalt mastic. We've had products work and we've had products that not work. This has been a question at the City of Sioux Falls for a long time, and I look at it falls into that category of running a pilot study, ultimately, so we can bring you back good data.
Councilor Karski, one more.
Just one last comment. I am looking forward to the study because I understand my neighborhood is included in the test area. They moved Councilor Jameson's neighborhood and moved it over to mine, so I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope it is conclusive. It's been a long time trying to resolve this, so I'm eager for the results next year.
You know, one thing that we're looking at is the city's, because it's 73 square miles out there, and we are seeing, because we're that large, we see every year a difference in snowfall. Typically, it seems like the south gets more snow, just the weather patterns that are coming in the last couple winters. The southern part of the city gets more snow than the northern part. I mean, how many times do you see the National Weather Service has the official recording system for the city of Sioux Falls, and they say they had 1/10 of an inch, and you have 3 inches, and you live on the south side. Same way with the snow. I mean, there's lots of time when the National Weather Service will say at the airport they have 1 inch of snow, and I can show you 3 to 4 inches on the south side of Sioux Falls. So I think by going through and doing this, where you're spreading these out throughout the city, you're going to get a lot better reflection of what the 73 square miles represents for us to try to remove the snow on, and for you on what that cost would be to do that if we implement snow gates. I'm just looking for some good data that I can tell you with confidence that this is what it's going to cost and this is what it's going to take and this is how long it will take if we implement this citywide.
Good. More questions, Councilor Jameson.
Galen, emergency snow routes would not be a good place for testing snow gates, right?
We haven't done it on the emergency snow routes, and let me explain why. First of all, emergency snow routes are major collector arterial streets. They're usually 4 to 5 lanes large, and when we're running without snow gates, our motor graders can run on the average about 15 miles an hour. If we put snow gates on there, I'm going to drop that miles per hour to at least 10 miles an hour, and it may be even less than that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the snow all the way across and give it to that last plow that has a snow gate on it, and that person's going to be dumping the snow. There's going to be a point where I put so much snow towards this thing that it's not going to be able to go very fast because of the snow coming out, and plus the ability for us to go up and down with our gate. And so we're going to slow traffic down a little bit. So I have been hesitant to test the arterial streets, the emergency snow routes, because of that. I don't know what it's going to be like for the citizens of Sioux Falls to follow me at 5 or 10 miles an hour, especially if I'm in a time zone when there's rush hour traffic either in the morning or in the evening. I haven't tested it because I wanted to go with one test at a time. I think that if we want to go with these things in the future for the City of Sioux Falls, certainly I'm going to have to try and test this, and that will test the patience of the driving public with me driving 5 to 10 miles an hour down an arterial street that has a 35 mile an hour speed limit to it.
Other questions, Councilor Jameson?
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Galen, could you briefly explain to us with the plows with Snowgate how you operate? In other words, do we have two plows and then we have one with the Snowgate, and then can you just explain how that works?
Yes. What we do is we put one motor grader in the center lane, basically on one half of the street, pulling from the center lane towards the gutter pan. And then we put the second motor grader alongside the gutter pan. That has a snow gate on it. So you got a tandem set of motor graders that are going along like this. One pushes to the other one takes it and pushes it off to the curb, and that's the one that has a snow gate. That person is watching where the gutter pan is, looking for fire hydrants, mailboxes, telephone pedestals, so that we don't take them out with the gate, and then watching where the driveway is, closing the gate, driving past it, and opening the gate in that process. And as the streets get wider, the motor graders have to, instead of overlapping as much as they do, they may not have very much overlap at all, depending on it. So I've stayed basically to the residential streets when I'm testing these, and I haven't gotten out on these emergency snow routes because they're so much wider, and I have to put like 3 motor graders out there, or like West 12th Street, I have 4 of them running at one time to push it from the center all the way to the curb.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Oh. On a warm summer day, this is great conversation. Thank you, Galen. Other questions from council for Galen? Well, we look forward to some real data. We appreciate your work, Galen. Thank you very much. Anything else to come before the informational meeting? This meeting will be followed by a land use committee meeting in about 10 minutes. That meeting will start at about 5:20 by the clock here at Carnegie Town Hall. And with that being said, this meeting is adjourned.